The chaos triggered by the killing of Qasem Soleimani, Iran's most celebrated military leader, is growing rapidly. And tonight, The National has full coverage. We investigate reports of Iranians being detained at the U.S.-Canadian border as hostile rhetoric escalates, with Donald Trump threatening to hit dozens of Iranian targets. We follow Iran's pledges to enrich uranium without limits, raising fears of renewed nuclear crisis. And in Iraq, a vote by lawmakers to expel U.S. forces that could undermine efforts to counter Iran and ISIS. From the moment it happened, there were warnings Soleimani's assassination could change the Middle East. And that is where Carolyn Dunn begins our coverage tonight.
Throngs of people filled the streets as the body of General Qasem Soleimani was returned to Iran. Iran's parliament vowing to avenge a martyr with chants of death to America. Its speaker calling the attack terrorism. Iraq furiously denounced the killing as a breach of its sovereignty. Its parliament angrily voted for the expulsion of U.S. troops working in that country to quell a resurgence of ISIS. Although it's not clear when the government will act on that vote. This Middle East expert warned the attack will have serious long-term consequences.
What President Trump did is to risk and endanger American lives throughout the Middle East and probably beyond. The killing of Soleimani has poured gasoline on a raging fire.
Britain, along with Canada, is part of the anti-ISIS coalition in Iraq. In a statement, UK Prime Minister Boris Johnson said General Qasem Soleimani posed a threat to all our interests. Given his actions have led to the deaths of thousands of innocent civilians and Western personnel, we will not lament his death. But his government still urged calm.
Boris Johnson is furious with Donald Trump because he had not told them about the killing of Soleimani in advance. There is anxiety all over European capitals, including in the UK.
Anxiety is running deep for NATO allies. A Canadian-led mission to train Iraqi security forces has been suspended to protect personnel, and the alliance will hold an emergency meeting on Monday. Meanwhile, increasing tensions are only fueling Iran's anger. Today, it made it clear it will no longer abide by limits on its nuclear program, as it considers even harsher retaliation for the assassination of its national hero. Carolyn Dunn, CBC News, London.
And as you heard there, roughly 500 Canadian troops in Iraq have put their training mission on hold, but it isn't over despite the Iraqi vote. According to the Department of National Defense, we continue to monitor and evaluate the situation and remain in close coordination with our international partners. Our goal remains a united and stable Iraq and preventing the reemergence of Daesh or ISIS. To Paul Hunter now in Washington, where the U.S. president is signaling a readiness to escalate this conflict, even as his decision to kill Soleimani faces growing scrutiny.
As Donald Trump arrived back in Washington tonight after a Christmas break in Florida, he had a message for his critics. Just hours after announcing the U.S. had targeted 52 sites inside Iran, including some that are culturally sensitive, tonight he's emphasized, should Iran strike any U.S. person or target, he tweeted, the United States will quickly and fully strike back, and perhaps in a disproportionate manner. In the fallout from the killing of Qasem Soleimani, with the fury already and the potential for retaliation, Trump critics have slammed the president, not least because Trump did what he did without broadly consulting the U.S. Congress. The new tweet, wrote Trump, serves as official notification for whatever he chooses to do next.
We will defend America.
Secretary of State Mike Pompeo today took the unusual step of appearing on all of the major Sunday talk shows, underlining the U.S. position that intelligence findings on Soleimani had it that he'd been plotting a, quote, imminent attack against the U.S. and absolutely had to be killed.
I'm confident that the decision we made to take down this terrorist, this designated terrorist who had inflicted so much harm over such an extended period, was the right course of action to reduce risk to America.
But pretty much every aspect of what Trump's done the past few days has come under fire from Trump critics.
He's been erratic and unsuccessful in almost every previous foreign policy endeavor. This one is the most dangerous of all.
I don't think the intelligence supports the conclusion that killing a top Iranian official is going to either stop plotting or improve American security.
We're now headed very close to the precipice of war.
Paul, we know that Trump can be sensitive to criticism at home, but how's he responding to the pushback in the Middle East?
Well, toward the end of his flight home tonight, he called reporters into the presidential cabin for a 30-minute conversation. On the record, he talked about the vote in Iraq today aimed at expelling American troops from that country, telling reporters the U.S. spent billions on the American air base there, and so, quote, "We're not leaving unless they pay us back for it," adding if Iraq forces the U.S. out, quote, "We will charge them sanctions like they've never seen before, ever." And remember, Iraq is a U.S. ally. Trump also talked about the heat he's taken for now targeting Iranian cultural sites. Here's another quote. "They're allowed to kill our people, they're allowed to torture and maim our people, and we're not allowed to touch their cultural site. It doesn't work that way." As for potential Iranian retaliation broadly, if it happens, he said, adding again, if they do anything, there will be major retaliation in return. Ian.
All right. Thank you, Paul. Paul Hunter in Washington tonight. With Iranian lawmakers chanting death to America, it is clear that vengeance is on the agenda. But what could retaliation look like? We asked Katie Nicholson to find out.
There are many options for possible direct and indirect attacks through the Iranian military or through its allies. One option is direct military action. In an interview with CNN, this senior military advisor to the Ayatollah says Iran isn't seeking an all-out war, but it will deliver a blow to the U.S. equal to the blow they have delivered. But this Middle East expert says Iran's bark may be worse than its bite.
We've seen very strong rhetoric, saying that they will pursue revenge, and they may well do so. But I hesitate to predict what the specific response is going to be or how broad it's going to be, primarily because what we've seen from the Iranians is that they are also rational actors.
Iran could use its regional influence to launch a proxy military attack on a U.S. ally, for example. Today, the former head of Iran's Revolutionary Guard said retaliation will include attacks on Israel and Israeli military centers.
Iran will probably seek to project its power through its proxy forces, through the areas where it has influence, such as Lebanon, Iraq, possibly Yemen, as well as Syria. And these actions are just simply going to result in more violence, in more victimization of the citizens in those countries.
Iran could choose to attack the oil supply. Remember this? It was July. The Iran Revolutionary Guard captured this British tanker. Geography gives Iran a lot of leverage. Nearly 30% of all oil tanker traffic moves through these waters in the Strait of Hormuz. Another possibility is cyber attacks. Iran has one of the most sophisticated hacking arsenals in the world. Already, it's being accused of taking over a minor U.S. government department website and uploading this picture of the U.S. president being punched in the face. But there are limits to this tactic.
Frankly, I don't think the Iranians will find a cyber attack that satisfying. There are things they can do. They've looked at critical infrastructure in the U.S. and elsewhere, but I think unfortunately, they're going to want to do something a little more violent.
Until Iran makes its move, it's impossible to say how far this could escalate. Katie Nicholson, CBC News, Toronto.
As the U.S. braces for what's next, those rising tensions may be spilling into Canada. Reports today that some people born in Iran are being detained as they try to cross into the United States. Tanya Fletcher has their stories.
Sam Sauter was born in Tehran and is a Canadian citizen. He's lived in North Vancouver for 15 years. On Saturday, his family of four set out on a weekend trip to Seattle, his first time visiting the U.S. They arrived at the Peace Arch border crossing at 11 a.m. They weren't released until 7:30 p.m. He says they were among dozens of Iranian-born travelers questioned for hours about family history and political ideology.
Mood is completely upset. They saw the kids over there and crying and no water. So they bring it to some snacks and the water. These are situations that only started yesterday.
Len Saunders is an immigration lawyer based in Blaine, Washington. He says at least 2 clients reached out for legal advice after they faced similar questioning yesterday. One sent him this text message saying, "A lady came by to see if we wanted water. I asked what's going on. She said they started this morning," not saying what this is. I said, "Should I go back to my parents and come back tomorrow?" She said it'll be the same tomorrow. Saunders then drove to the border to see for himself. He says he's heard several stories with one connecting thread.
The only thing that is similar to all of these individuals is they're all born in Iran. And so anyone from that country is being interrogated. I've never seen that in 20 years.
U.S. Customs and Border Protection tells CBC News there has been no directive to detain or refuse Iranians entry into the U.S. because of their country of origin. In a statement, a spokesperson says processing times are the result of the current circumstances, including staffing levels, volume of traffic, and threat posture. As for Sadr, he says he'll never return to the U.S. again.
I told the officer, this is called discrimination. I'm not come back again here, and you never see me.
And what did they say?
Good luck.
Tanya Fletcher, CBC News, Vancouver.